where we're sitting right here. Okay, so North Carolina embraced what Missouri did. Now the question here, as far as the whole idea of narrative competition and everything, is what happened that transformed, you know, the magic bullet. Maybe that's the wrong term to use in terms of this, but I mean, what transformed the great promise of Venturi Biosciences into the pariah of Missouri, which it literally became. Okay, it even got so far as a memorandum of agreement was signed. And I had to use the metaphor that it sowed the seeds of dread, because once it became closer to being a reality that we would have these things here. We even had a good friend of mine who's a professor of agriculture at that university, actually was growing genetically modified rice in his yard. He like plowed up his yard and he had test rice plots on his yard. You know, he was so excited about this, and he said, I'm going to get a head start, you know, and do this. And it really was generating this tremendous amount of excitement. Then, what happens? Well, what happens is a familiar sort of thing, of course, in various European communities of people hearing about the prospect of genetically modified foods and all of this. The organic farmers started mobilizing. There is a not a terribly politically influential, but noteworthy and reasonably well organized organic farming movement in that area, and so they mobilized. Well, they got the ear of some legislators, and before long, they got the ear of Anheuser-Busch. And Anheuser-Busch then made at least from a public relations standpoint, an ingenious move. They entered the fray. Now bear in mind, Anheuser-Busch is located in St. Louis. St. Louis is a world away from where this was going to happen. It's like a 5.5-hour drive if you take the major highway. Or doesn't have any necessary relationship to what people are going to do with that information and how they're going to use that to formulate coherent arguments and cogent understanding and how they approach their role in society. For example, this oversimplification of scientific complexities as what I call the agonistic heuristic, is just a battle between scientists. Well, they can't decide, so it must just be a mess. Okay? And also, how do we communicate about the warrants? Okay? Also, how do we deal with power asymmetries? This touches on a lot of the issues that Pat went over, so I won't spend much time on this. But you know, part of the problem is a lot of our public engagement models are still based on this didactic model that is what Freire talks about as the banking model of education. You might call it the same type of model here. You know, just infuse people's heads with a lot more basic facts. Well, what about the rationales underlying the findings about nanotechnology? And again, what happens then? What's the next step? Okay. And this idea that audiences are active. Very often what we need to do is to trace the guiding narratives about nanotechnology and technology in general, or even innovation in general, that often take the form of value-saturated stories that function mythically. By functioning mythically, I'm talking about they insulate themselves from counter-arguments. They attempt to provide certain and all-encompassing explanations. And we have to take a closer look at those risk heuristics. Here are a few quotes from a conversation I recently had with the director of a nano center that show some symptoms of the problem. Okay? Well, when we communicate to the public, gosh, we got to dumb down our research. Boil down to the effects. Is that really all we have to do? Okay? Or is the public storehouse of understanding and decision-making richer than that? I'd like to think so. If you're talking about public and scientific engagement being at a stalemate, you're still involving this sort of agonistic heuristic, all right? Because it's either stalemate or one party wins or the other party wins. It's not a matter of winning, losing. It's a matter of working together toward what might craft better decisions based on better relationships. And the last comment, I'm an engineering geek. I don't do public policy. I think one of the issues here is that we're seeing more and more, regardless of the role we play, and there are a lot of different roles represented in this room, to some extent we're all engaged in playing a role in the shaping of public policy. And the more we understand that we play a role in that, the greater chance there is for a productive collaboration, not only between us, but between us and people that would never step into a room in a forum like this. because they also play a role in collaboratively shaping the kind of relationship that might not necessarily foster better decisions at the end, however that's measured, but will simply engage each other in exploring the possibilities for decision making. And ultimately, isn't that what democracy is all about? Thank you.